pal.
Hey there, welcome to Money Never Sleeps, a podcast that looks inside the head of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. I'm Pete Townsend, your co-host of Money Never Sleeps, along with Eoin Fitzgerald. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is kindly sponsored by Ireland's fintech and financial services recruitment specialist, Top Tier Recruitment. If you or a colleague need help attracting and retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, it is highly advisable that you build a relationship with the team at Top Tier Recruitment as they really know their stuff. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com and tell them we sent you. Also, you can subscribe to our Money Never Sleeps newsletter at moneyneversleeps.substack.com. We launched our new website last month, so check that out on moneyneversleeps.ie. This week, we've hit a few milestones with 100 subscribers to the Money Never Sleeps newsletter, and what you're listening to right now is episode 100 of our podcast. Also, we were included in the FeedSpot list of the top 20 entrepreneur podcasts that you must follow in 2020, so a shout out to FeedSpot and thank you for the mention. As it is episode 100, we're covering our favorite topic this week with the challenges of the challengers, along with each of our top 5 episodes of all time, all packaged up as this week's episode of Money Never Sleeps.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Here we go again. Welcome to Money Never Sleeps. We're recording today from the home studio, and get ready. This is episode 100.
Whoop, whoop.
Yep. We got something special on tap for y'all tonight. And yes, it is nighttime because money never sleeps, pal, right? Said that a few times over the course of the last 99 episodes and say it one more time today. We're both going to go through our top 5 episodes of all time, which was really, really hard to do. But first, our favorite topic for our 100th episode is Challenger Banks. A lot happened in the last week or so, the last 10 days, a lot of stuff coming out of the wash. We just couldn't ignore it. Of course, you can hear him. Who else would be with me for this episode? But of course, Eoin Fitzgerald. How you doing way out there in Kildare, Clark Kent?
I'm good. I'm still locked down. I'm waiting to escape. But,
Are you?
All good. Excited.
Did you get that Clark?
I got that Clark Kent reference.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be Farm Boy or it could be Superman in disguise, right?
Yeah, that's it.
One or the other. All right, so let's kick it off. We're going to dig right in. The one story that we're going to cover before we get into our respective top 5s from Isabel Woodford at Sifted. And I think it's just awesome seeing her doing all this. I didn't really know of her that much before when she was with EFT. And the 2 middle letters of the word Sifted, and for all those out there who don't know, Sifted is kind of now an alternative news platform covering fintech, covering tech, a few other verticals as well. And Isabel was previously with EFT. The 2 middle letters of Sifted is F and T, right? Makes sense. And you're sifting out all the stuff out of the FT that wasn't all that interesting, right? And finding the stuff that was interesting and putting it into Sifted. So that's the way I at least rationalize it, because I killed my FT subscription just recently. And now I'm reading Sifted just because I found I was having such a hard time getting through that every day. Because I was just reading stuff from my past that I'm no longer that interested in. I don't know, to try to keep tabs on things. But anyway, so the story was Starling, Revolut, and Monzo's annual results compared, right? And that was on the 17th of August. And analysts weighed in on why digital banks are still heavily loss-making and where their latest financial results leave them. One of the analysts quoted, and I'll get right to the meat of it, what I wanted to talk through, Eoin. One of the analysts that was quoted in this piece by Isabel Woodford was Lex Sokolin, who has his own newsletter, the FinTech Blueprint. And he said, and I'm kind of paraphrasing him here on the quote, where he said, if you look at the enterprise value per customer of each of these 3 digital banks, which is basically their big, huge, honking unicorn valuation divided by the number of users they have, right? It's saying, okay, what's it worth divided by number of users? You end up with each customer of each one of these banks being worth about $1,000 in enterprise value. What Lex said was, in reality, this $1,000 of enterprise value compared to where they actually are from a revenue perspective, each of these 3 companies are making $20 to $30 per customer. So how do you go from $20 or $30 per customer to an enterprise value of over $1,000 per customer? And Lex is saying, are these banks at all, or are they media companies with financial services monetization? Owen, what do you think?
That is an interesting question. So I mean, it was great to see them all compared. The first thing to note is that actually it's really interesting that they publish their annual reports like this. So you don't often get that level of detail put out from a company like this. Like, you don't get it for the US companies. So it was great to be able to see, and then you're able to do a kind of like for like, which they've obviously done in the article here, which was really interesting, and it kind of splits them out really well. You can see where each of the business is coming from. And I just wanted to, I suppose, focus on a couple of the kind of key pieces before we get into your question. But it kind of points to the real difference between the three of them. Interchange fees, card transaction fees for the uninitiated, saying that it's still a big piece of all three business models, especially for Revolut. And if you're like Revolut's, I suppose, foundation and Monzo's almost to the same extent were as prepaid cards. So it's not surprising that 63% of Revolut's revenues are coming from interchange fees, 55% from Monzo, but then that actually Sterling is less than half that, so it's only 45%. So they've managed to reduce their dependence on that and have started collecting fees on, they've like 80,000 business accounts and other kind of banking as a service customers. So they're starting to, Sterling was probably slower out of the gates because it was trying to build that fuller bank platform, and to be a bank providing banking services, as opposed to coming at it from the other side, which the guys did with their, their kind of prepaid card piece. To come back to your question then around the media piece, it's really interesting because a good friend of ours, we've had him on the show before, obviously is doing something interesting in this space, and I've talked a lot about valuations with him, and something he keeps coming back to, and he would have been a former head of equity analysis for, I think it was either JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, so a guy who knows exactly what he's talking about in terms of analyzing tech companies. But he said that what's really fascinating here is that the valuations of the likes of Revolut and stuff are tied to the kind of Netflix model. It's a kind of rule of thumb, $1 billion valuation for every million customers sort of thing. It's comparing them to the Netflix sort of model, which is an interesting analogy then when you talk about it from your point of view, what you talked there about the media side of it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Media companies, I suppose, and I think you mean that in the kind of monetization way as opposed to the creating content sort of thing.
I kind of looked a bit further into this and used this little tool called Google. You ever hear of it?
No, right? I haven't actually.
And just Googled media company revenue model or business model. And I came up with this guy, Art Whitman, who did industry research and it was called Chasing Profitability in a Changing Media Landscape. And it was from Oracle NetSuite's Brainyard. What he said was media companies have just three ways to monetize content: sell per instance rights to use or recurring subscriptions, sell ads around content, or sell ads on consumers. That's it. Every revenue model essentially devolves down to one of these three, according to Art, right? So are digital banks doing these things? Are they doing subscriptions, right? In the minority, you can pay for the metal card, you can pay for the premium service, you can pay for whatever, but most are not. With Netflix, obviously you are paying for, you obviously are paying a subscription. Sell ads around the content, if you and your spending is basically the content, or they kind of are selling ads indirectly, right? Especially with the different deals they have in place through the marketplace or through partnerships. But the pandemic changed a lot of the spending patterns. So I'm not sure if that really stacks up. And then selling data on consumers, who knows? They say they're not, but having that much data on how consumers spend money, that's really valuable stuff, right?
Yeah.
And whether they are using that to create some other type of partnership deal or something, it all has to be part of the model, because that's where the original idea to create challenger banks all came from. It's like data was around, Web 2.0 and the economists saying data is the new oil and those types of things, right?
Yeah, and that's it. It's about being able to do really interesting stuff by having that data. And clearly they can, and Revolut can tell me all sorts of interesting things and dress it up nice and fancy. And I think and we talked about this before when we discussed a couple of months back at this point, we discussed about Revolut potentially looking to buy like one of the travel companies or something like that. And it's about the kind of downstream piece. So, from their point of view, they're trying to bring everyone into their ecosystem. And I think that's where the subscription to me is the ideal model here in terms of some of these companies. Probably more so Revolut and Monzo than Starling. Starling, like I said, seems to be going down the pure banking side of things. And that's obviously a factor from Anne Bowden's background. But, Revolut, I think I subscribe, and the more I pay, the more premium I get. I pay the premium price and I get a premium product. And I think that means that I get additional products whereby I don't have to then do any extra work to get access to those products because they've already got the data on me to be able to say, well, now you're eligible for this insurance product, or you can get, you want to rent a car in this location. It's because we have this partnership, but we already have the data. So we've already done the initial piece of work for you, and you're paying for that extra access or whatever it is.
Yeah, I get that. And I think Starling's marketplace, right? I think in that piece, it said they made something like 72,000 last year on that, which is still small beans. I think they're, going the right direction on that, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to their overall revenue. Right. So, a long way to go there. The other thing that I kind of picked out was that when I think of media companies, you think of just, you have somebody's attention, right? When you're a Netflix or you're anybody that can take the attention of Facebook, taking your attention, right? And putting things in front of you where you are the product, right? With Google, you, the user, are the product, right? There's somebody else that's paying for that attention. Now, when you use the Monzo app or the Starling app or the Revolut app, are you seeing a bunch of ads coming up? No, you're not, right? But that attention, I think, is being funneled and fueled a different way to say that, well, we know how much you're spending on these different products. We know how much you're spending in these different categories in these different retail outlets. So we're going to create partnerships with these folks because we know the spending is going there. We're going to offer discounts because we know the volume of money being spent there. So in an indirect way, absolutely, it's the attention that's being paid for. My big thing with this, though, is that if there's value in having somebody's attention, can you keep it for the long term, right? If it's relatively easy to switch between digital banks because in the majority, again, as our good pal Chris Skinner says, and of course on episode 100, we have to mention him again. Shout out to Chris.
Yeah.
That he always says this. He said, you're still using your old school bank for the boring stuff, all of your utilities, all of your bills. And you're using your digital bank for your lifestyle spending, the fun stuff, right? So if all of your direct debits and all the hard stuff to change is still going through your boring old bank, right? And it's easy to switch between Monzo and Starling. Do Monzo and Starling really have our attention for the long term?
No,
I don't think they do. They don't have that stickiness yet. Revolut, I carve out of that conversation because Revolut's different with the FX. A lot of the value of Revolut is the ease of which you can switch from dollar to sterling to euro to whatever other currency that you want, to Bitcoin, right? So there is some stickiness there. If I were to narrow it down to one, I would get rid of, everything else, keep one. And I've talked a lot about this before, and I'll say it again with Starling when they launch in Ireland, I'll move everything over there. Get rid of my main bank that I'm using right now, but still keep Revolut for travel, right? When that does actually come back to life.
And we talked about this a few weeks back, when I made a prediction that I'll still stand over that Monzo will be the one to go. I think Starling and Revolut have different value propositions, and I think they're both making really good headway on that sense. And like you said, Revolut, I have a Revolut account, but I'm paying the extra bit to get cards for two of my kids. Yep. I bought some Bitcoin through it. I have some shares through it. It's just so easy to use, and I'll use it for that. Now I won't move over, but the fact that I've been able to use their open banking solution to connect my other account means that I don't have to. And they may not ever be anything more than that, but they certainly can do a hell of a lot of cool stuff in it. in terms of giving me access to other products that I can't get with my own bank. So they may not get my salary, but they are getting the data anyway by being able to connect to it. And then you look at Sterling. Like I said, I think it'll be the more boring of the three in terms of being the boring old bank, which has the business accounts and is more like a normal bank. And I think Monzo's in the middle, not sure who it wants to be.
Yeah, just imagine when one of these banks starts getting the majority of their users' paychecks, right? I think it was Monzo that made just as much revenue last year on overnight deposits at the Bank of England compared to what they made on interchange. And interchange is a huge chunk of their revenue, right? That X percent, or I think it's something like 55 basis points that they get off of every card transaction. And there's a cost to that, right? That comes out the other end. But imagine how much more they can make when that starts getting placed. I was in BNP Paribas in 2008, 2009, where interest rates started dropping through the floor. And all of that wonderful float that the bank used to have that was at interest rates of 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever, it just went through, it disappeared, right?
Yeah.
And that changes your model. And I remember the cost pressures, the headcount pressures that were put on the bank at the time to really change things.
Well, do you know what? If we coming back to your thing around the attention bit, I suppose, and we talked about how the valuations are maybe compared to the likes of Netflix. Like, there's a really interesting thing happening in the US. I don't know if you're familiar with Quibi. We don't have it over here. It launched in the US. I think it was Meg Whitman, who used to be CEO of, I can't remember, but two incredibly well-respected kind of execs raised $1.8 billion to launch, I suppose, a competitor to Netflix and HBO and all these sort of things. But these were bites. Their specific kind of USP was they were bite-sized episodes of whatever. So they paid like...
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
They hired a whole load of, or they paid out to a whole load of really well-known celebs and actors and stuff to create content on it. But it was only going to be like 10 minutes long or something. And each episode was only a short thing. And that's what they were trying to catch. But I mean, it absolutely bombed. They've lost the majority of that. They've had to completely change now. They've had to raise some more money. And they're trying to do the usual, blame it on COVID. But, when you've got like Netflix and Disney Plus, which I have, and in the US, and then you've got HBO, and HBO launched two different versions, HBO Go and HBO Max. And when you have all those options, it's a diminishing return on the next one. And, everyone is fighting for that attention, whereby actually, how many people have cut loose from Netflix? They don't. They'll still keep that. It's almost like that's my core. I don't have the terrestrial channels on my TV here. I just have a smart TV and I have Netflix and iTunes. Me too. And I don't see that I'd ever close down Netflix because it still gives me the majority of the stuff that I want from it. And I have Disney as well, but I only watch that for like movies with the kids and stuff. So it's kind of the same analogy in the bank space. You'll have that one core one, whether it's your existing bank where you do the majority of your stuff, and then you'll have what is the next best one that meets your particular needs. I think to me, Revolut is the one that's out there ahead in terms of meeting the needs of the majority. That's why it has 10 million customers. But I do feel that, like I said, Sterling will be the one that captures the kind of long-term value of certain types of customers on the business side and the more steady banking side.
Yeah, that really came out in their loan numbers as well. I think we talked about this a few weeks ago on how much Monzo lost on their loan book, being something like 15, 20%. And Starling, I think, was down less than 5%, right, on what they lost, right? So, and also the weighting of their high risk to medium risk to low risk loans was far more appropriate than what Monzo had done. But yeah, like you said, that comes out and Bowden's lineage and, her experience in running banks.
But everyone is still, they all are still fighting for our attention, for want of a better description, and the next challenger, like I would see it that the next one that comes after the next one, they're in a worse position. They're playing catch up. So they need to have something really unique. And there's so many of them out there. Some of the country specific ones I think will do fine, like Nubank in Brazil. I think it has 25 million customers or something. It's absolutely killing it down there. it meets a specific need, and maybe there'll be some that'll be a bit more international because they're going after, they can solve the problem of the unbanked or financial inclusion maybe, but I just don't think there's not going to be that many of them.
No, I think they're going to start getting acquired. And, when that conversation had come up before, it's like, okay, what big bank is going to acquire what challenger bank? Because they're just going to suffocate them.
Yeah.
Like, what was it?
RBS
RBS and poor Bo the cow.
Poor Bo.
Right? Yeah, poor Bo. And the name that came up in reading these series of articles that were all interlinked, Owen, was Facebook, right? Yeah. Or a Google, or somebody that says, listen, if these challenger banks are actually just data companies or media companies, so are we, right? Let's just buy one of them, and let's see what we can do by putting their tech onto overdrive and putting these business models around consumer data into overdrive. That I think is going to be far more interesting, in where, like you said, if they're all fighting for the attention right now in a small market like the UK, not small, I mean, it's something like 50 million, consumers that actually would be of bank account age and be able to be actually spending money. If the rule of thumb is, well, can you capture 10% of the market? That's 5 million. Right. And all of them are kind of around there, if not a little bit less or a little bit more. So
I'd say
there's not much left room to grow. So buy one, take it out of the market, and then make some room for some even better ones coming through.
What you might see, because we talked about, obviously, like if you think of Apple and their partnership, like Apple and Amazon and Facebook, they have the critical mass to be able to monetize and offer financial products without having to go down the bank route. And they're able to do that, or they can do an Apple and partner with was it JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs on their card. So they don't need to go the bank route. It's probably going to be somebody who wants to be relevant. So it's like the discussions going on now, Microsoft buying TikTok. Why the hell are they doing that? They're buying it for the algorithm. But they're not the one that you would think of, obviously, as the ideal kind of partner there or acquirer. So I think it'll be something like that. Someone that isn't able to offer financial services products to a large customer base, and effectively wants to reverse its way into a bank then by doing that. To stay relevant, to get access to. I should write down all these predictions as I'm coming up with them.
I know. I'd like to see. You should. Yeah. We'll come back to them.
Newsletter topic. That's what I need.
Absolutely, predictions, and we'll talk about predictions in a bit as well. But.
That's where I see it happening. I see some of the lesser or the challenger banks that just haven't worked out too well, but still have a decent customer base, will get acquired by tech companies that are trying to be relevant and offer services.
Get customers.
Yeah.
Right. Why not go acquire 4 million customers overnight for, a cool few billion?
Yeah. Because I mean, what? Let's say, for example, Monzo, who I expect will get acquired, who's going to buy them? Another bank, just to absorb customers, of which they probably already have some of those customers already.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'd be really interesting to look at the overlap there. When I was doing, looking at M&A years ago, it was always, okay, which one of these customers in this company that we're looking to potentially acquire do we already have a relationship with? And is it worth buying their revenue, right? And buying that relationship? No, it's not, because we probably go get that relationship ourselves and just take it away from them.
You might find it's somebody like, someone in the lending space that wants to have the front end piece as well on the customer side. So someone who's doing, I don't know who the big lenders are across Europe. Someone like a Link Financial or somebody comes to mind, whereby they already do like the mortgage processing and origination stuff in different markets.
Yeah,
but don't have the front end, the consumer piece. Maybe that's a good fit. Something like that, I think, might be a fit for Monzo.
Yeah, get Eddie Dillon from Credit Logic to spin up and do an acquisition.
Yeah.
Shout out to Eddie. If there's anybody with the chutzpah to go try to do a big reverse takeover like that, it's certainly Eddie Dillon.
Yeah.
There was one more interesting thing that came up on this, and this may not be that interesting to you, but I loved how the consultation paper, and I can't believe I just said that, I loved a consultation paper by the UK Prudential Regulatory Authority. I'm such a regulatory geek. They released it this week that this consultation paper where they were challenging the business model of challenger banks. Great, challenging the challenger. And the paper described the banks, and I'm quoting it here, as facing rapid growth. Yeah, tick. Making losses. Absolutely. Reliant on regular capital injections. Well, I'd call that venture capital injections, right? Significant and rapid changes in strategy and business model. Yeah, absolutely. Look at how, Revolut stapled on cryptocurrency pretty quickly. And immature controls. And I know that from firsthand experience with one of these challenger banks specifically. And I'm not going to get into that again. So it says nothing about them being media companies, obviously. But I thought that was, in a nutshell, a very good description of these. The immature controls was one of the most interesting things for me with my COO background. But they are basically saying, listen, back in 2015, 2016, we realized that there was way too much of an oligopoly, if that's the right word, in the UK market in terms of banking. And we needed to be more fluid with the licensing. And so we will, get more consultative in how we take on new banks that are looking to get licensed in the UK. And you ended up with Revolut, Monzo, Starling, so on and so forth. And now they're kind of saying, listen, we probably, I don't think they said this outright, but they're saying we probably open the gates a little bit too much. And is there some risk, some systemic risk now by the fact that some of these companies may not be able to support their customers for the long run? That's what this is all about.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a customer impacted like there was with Wirecard?
Joe, right? We brought this up recently when we talked about when Monzo obviously when in their annual report they mentioned that they need to be treated as a going concern, and it's an accounting term or it's an auditing term that needs to be put in there to recognize these companies rely on, they're not revenue generate or profitable yet, and they still need to rely on equity investment. But I suppose it raises a wider question, which is probably what they're getting at there, being like, can a bank be treated as a going concern? Surely that goes against the whole idea of a bank and the stability that it should have. With the 4 million customers or whatever, surely that is a risk in itself if they're not stable and not well capitalized.
Absolutely. It is. And, I think they called for Monzo to inject more capital, right? And to step up for that. I mean, it's definitely a risk. But, I think they are taking an approach of saying, what is the size of their balance sheets? What is the size of their deposits? Starling being kind of the front runner in terms of average deposits per customer. And they're probably the best controlled, right?
Yeah.
And I think their loan book risk weighting shows that. Jesus, I can't believe I'm getting all banking again. It's scary. Let's get away from this.
Yeah.
Back to media companies and fun stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will, for the first 99 episodes, we talked about challenger banks quite a lot. For 100, we've now gone into about 25 plus minutes on challenger banks. So let's move on to the pomp and circumstance of our respective top 5 episodes of all time.
Yes.
Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
No, go ahead. Go for it.
Okay. This was tough for me. I came up with 15 initially, and that was going through 99. And you and I came up with, in my top 15, there were 2 that were in your top 5. And we'll get into that. And I have very different reasons for how I picked each one of these. I do have some honorable mentions at the end as well, if we get to that. But in no particular order, my top 5, the first one that I'm going to mention is episode 93, who was Zach Liu and Kurlek. So that's Southeast Asia. It is direct debit utility that is very unique to the Southeast Asian market. And on that episode, I don't know, I was somewhat prepared for that, but that was really the first time that I had altered the questions that we usually ask the guest to make them a bit more specifically relevant to the individual rather than just trying to get inside their head in the same way. And that just made a difference. And he and I really connected on a couple of the topics having to do with demographics in Malaysia specifically, and even got into my background in Islamic finance, which I hadn't really ever thought about in years, which was quite interesting. and seeing how that all applied. So we just really connected. So I really like that one. The next one I'm going to mention was episode 38, which was Friends and Respect. So I did that one with Paul Smith and Laura Smith from Top Tier Recruitment, and also Possible.ie, Paul's coaching business, and Lisa White and Vessi Tasheva. And that was about diversity in the workplace. And that was kind of a bit of a curveball for me and leading this discussion, but also expressing myself in different areas that I thought were interesting. And getting those 4 people together to have a chat on this was really interesting. It was really challenging and hard to do, but I thought it came out well. So I wanted to mention that one. The next one you were on as well, Eoin, and don't take this the wrong way. It looks like the 3 of the 5 that I picked, you weren't on the show, but that's
okay. It's okay.
There was a whole bunch there when you were busy out the wazoo where you just missed a few.
You were flying a flag solo.
Exactly. So episode 37, Fight for Your Right with Graham Rodford from Archax. Never mind the BC Boys reference of just making it, such a great episode. But Graham's such a great guy. And just having that rapport with someone before you do the recording, that just leads to such a better conversation.
Such a difference.
And I think you had one of those as well to mention. And I think we really got him talking in an introspective way that he really liked, that he may not have expected. And also special congrats to Graham and all the guys at Archax. They just got their first FCA authorization for their digital asset exchange. And we'll hopefully be going live with that soon. But that was a great conversation. We got into mixed martial arts and a few other things. And there was quite a few helpful nuggets there in terms of how to think about moving out of the corporate world and moving into the startup world. The next one, so the 4th one I'm going to mention out of my top 5, Money Made Me Do It. That was my first solo episode that I did. Again, really hard to do. But Elaine, we had it's such a great rapport that we developed quickly. I don't know how, but we totally connected. We had lots of overlap in our own awakenings on fintech going back to 2013, 2014. So the timeline was kind of the same and similar as to what she was doing, what I was doing. And we got into a bit of Espanol as well with her ability to speak Spanish and my very limited attempts at speaking Spanish coming back from a number of years ago. So that was a great conversation. And we did a replay of that one as well, and then had her on again for another episode that we did. And finally, the one I wanted to mention was episode 15, which was Angels with Chris Adelsbach.
Yes,
he was then with Techstars. Yep. Yeah, he's now founding partner at Outrun Ventures. Investing in fintech, a few other spaces as well. But that was a great conversation. He's such a great person, American guy like myself. And we kind of had a few similar views of the world that kind of created some synergistic stars in the sky type, snippets. And our pal Martin Cass was lurking in the background of that conversation as well in the old conference room of Top Tier Recruitment on Mount Street in Dublin in their old office before they moved to WeWork. So that was... I think that was during the summer of 2018 when we first recorded that. So that was a fun one, and I really liked that conversation. First one that you and I did kind of around venture capital and investing, which really piqued both of our interests in that space. So that was my top 5 rounded out. You want to go for yours?
Yes. For me, again, no particular order. Last week's episode 99 with Peter Gagan, I thought was just brilliant. And an honorable mention, because it was kind of a toss-up between the two, was the episode we had with Bradley Tusk. I can't remember the exact episode number. That was 27. 27, yeah. And both of those are the ones where I tweeted someone who'd just written a book and said, can you come on the show? And both gave the time, which was just fantastic and just shows the power of Twitter. I really need to do more of that. But I don't hide the fact that I'm fascinated at the kind of intersection of politics and tech, and Peter's story, but also his own personal story is fantastic. But the topics he was going into around Brexit and everything, to me, is just fascinating, and it was really interesting for him to see it. And then similarly, like I said, the Bradley Tusk one, where it's his move from politics into tech investing and how he worked over the years with the likes of Uber and Airbnb and others, just fascinating. So really enjoyed that one. We could have talked for hours to Peter.
I know.
I could have talked myself separately to for hours. So I really enjoyed that one.
I love that chat. It was great.
Episode 57, The Prediction with Andrew Milani. Love Andrew. Such a good guy. And he had such a fascinating story. It was one of those interviews that we did whereby I work with Andrew in my role at Enterprise Ireland and the company that he's working with now and he's co-founded now. And I'd met him once or twice before that, but actually, like, I think we got to like 45, 50 minutes and it felt like it had flown by. It felt like we hadn't covered half the stuff we wanted to talk about. It was one of those ones where I kind of remember looking at you being like, we kind of need to cut it off now. We've been going on so long, but yet we had so much more to talk about. He's had such a fascinating career with NewsWhip and some of the stuff he worked with prior to that in the startup space, and there's so much to add to that space that it was just a really interesting conversation. He's a really thoughtful guy, so very enjoyable. There was an interesting sheep story at the end that anyone who wants to hear will have to go back and listen to that one.
Yeah. On the artwork for that one, I remember I was going through this period with the artwork for each episode where I was struggling with it and trying to figure out how did we talk about going up an escalator through a mountain, and I was messing around with all these images on Google Images to try to get it right. And I finally found a way to put an escalator inside a picture of a snow-covered mountain. And then I took this little tiny sheep and I dropped it in a very small in the valley between the two mountains, whatever. And that's in there. So, anybody can go find that sheep and tell me that you found it. That'd be pretty cool.
Next up for me, episode 26 with Anne O'D. Anne O'D, I just think is an absolutely wonderful person. And I had such a good time talking to her. I'd met her for lunch a couple of times prior to that. Obviously a big fan of everything she'd done with Silicon Republic. Just, like I said, just a fantastic career and all the work she'd done and the tech side of things and tech reporting and everything. So it was one of those ones where I just really wanted to talk to the person, have another reason to talk to Anne. So it was great, and we were delighted to have her on the show that time. And fascinated that she's so into birds and everything, which I learned now from, obviously, I follow her on Twitter and I see all the stuff that she tweets. So that was a great one. Really enjoyed that. And you hadn't met her, but it was like you guys hit it off really well.
Yeah, we did. It was a great chat, and I've stayed in touch with Anne, and she's been helpful.
I always get involved with any of the events that they're doing in terms of speaking. I was on
InspireFest is now
InspireFest previously. Yes, InspireFest now. I helped out and I've done some of the panels and stuff on that, and always keen to any chance to work with Anne and the team.
Yeah, she liked that we were, because Arlen Hamilton, who we've talked about on this podcast before, she spoke at InspireFest a couple of times before. And so Anne was happy to hear us talking about Arlen.
Next up, one of my favorite people that I get to work with on a regular basis is Sean Vaughnan, and he was on episode 42. And actually, it was a funny one. It's one of those ones where we interviewed a founder and we talked very little about the company whatsoever, because at the time, and still kind of in stealth mode at the moment in the banking as a service space. Just to me, Sean is like, with his career from going from a PhD in history in Cambridge to equity analysis with one of the big banks. He had his own, he wrote his own screenplay and directed his own movie. Like, it was just such a random kind of journey through his career and all of the interesting stories. And he that story he told us about having to present an award on stage where everyone was like booing him before he came on because he was introed as some former banker or something like that. Like, it's just such a fascinating career, and like he telling us that he owns a castle in Galway and all this sort of stuff. So I spend hours chatting to on a regular basis just about all sorts of things. So
Sean's a good guy, and lessons to be learned from him in being so stealth about his business, right? And in this day and age where entrepreneurs are out there, 20 years younger than Sean or more, talking about their product, talking about everything they're going to be doing before they've built it, just as a way to kind of impress folks. And this isn't just, from a fundraising perspective, this is just out in public, right? And, bigging up, right? And Sean kind of came to the fore in industry where it was like, well, we got to be pretty confidential about things no matter what it is that we're doing. And I'm just going to keep being confidential about what it is that we're doing. And that's just the way I do my business. So loads of respect to him for that. And I don't think we lost anything, though, by his lack of expressive-ness on his business. Because
not at all.
Such a fantastic storyteller. The playwright thing is just going to stick with me forever.
And last but certainly not least, one of my favorites, absolutely of the 100, was the first one with Brian Norton. I'm a big Brian Norton fan. Obviously, I haven't worked closely with him for a couple of years. I continue to work with him now with his new company that he's Supply Finance. Great guy, Absolutely great guy. Like again, it was the first one, but I think we way overran what we expected to, but got so much good stuff from Brian and his, how he started off, obviously building websites out of college while in college, and making money doing that, and then. Here's a guy who knows pretty much everything there is to know about, online lending, mortgage lending, kind of any sort of consumer lending business. Brian knows it, and he knows it inside out. And I often kind of run things by him. I have a good relationship with him, and I'm delighted to say that I still keep in regular contact with him. But just fascinating guy, and so kind of well read and everything.
Yeah, I remember that first episode we did in Dogpatch Labs in their innovation room. That was the old men's clothing store. What was it called? Louis
Copeland. And we had two sound guys that day, didn't we? It was
we had Gav and Conan Brophy.
Gav and Conan, yeah.
Shout out to both those guys. They've been with us since the beginning. I only ever see bills from Gav, but Conan obviously is edited. I think every single episode.
Couldn't have done it without Conan.
Such a legend, such a professional. And I say this in the outro now, and probably better to do it in the middle of an episode. But if anybody out there is thinking about getting together their own podcast, get in touch with Conan Brophy.
Oh yeah,
totally hook you up and get you going.
Professional, brilliant.
It's good stuff. Great to have Conan on board helping us out. The one other thing with Brian that I wanted to mention was that he said on the episode something to the effect of when he was out raising capital. Took him a very long time. I don't remember exactly how long it took him, but he said something like he got 150 no's, 150 pitches he did. Not just emails, he said, but pitches. And you needed to learn to love the no. And I saw him at a Dogpatch Labs presentation talking specifically about this. We had up this big picture of just the woods.
Yeah, the wilderness or something, I think he calls it, isn't it? Or something,
yeah. It's like you're out in the wilderness by yourself. And I've said that before. Like when I started doing this in 2016, I was like a little boy lost in the woods. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, right? Yeah. And so just really always associated with him to that. So thanks to Brian for being our first victim.
And look, there's loads of, it's hard to pick, in fairness. We're very fortunate, and a big thanks to all of our guests, obviously, because we're really lucky to have such a good network to lean on, but also people who we may not be that close to, who we've been able to, like in some cases I've literally tweeted them and they've been like a good sport to come on, and in other cases they're a second level connection that we don't know directly, and someone has put us in touch with them and they're keen to come on. And also, like, we kind of have a different approach to kind of most things. We're not really looking to talk about the business as much as we are about the person, and everyone has been open to that. And we probably should have, instead of thinking of maybe our favorite quotes, it would have been the favorite, tell us something you don't know about yourself, because there's been some really great ones over the 100 episodes.
I'd say if we throw that in front of Conan as a challenge.
Oh yeah, that's how you can do that.
I know what he'll say. He'll say, "Oh, guys, sorry, listen, I don't have all the files. I kind of put them in archive." I'm like, well, we can now download every single one of the files for him from Anchor. Switching over to that in the last month that we've done. That's been a heck of a lot of work, I think, as you know, is moving away from Transistor onto Anchor.
100 episodes in, and we're still like, it's trying to get
learning,
trying to find the one that works the best in terms of being able to record. And sometimes, obviously, in the last while, record remotely all the time. I'm sure I speak for you as well. I incredibly enjoy it. Like, it's one of my favorite things to do is just chat to companies or chat to people or chat to you just about stuff that we're interested in. And the whole point of this was that we looking at Money Never Sleeps. It came about because we're looking at this stuff all the time anyway, even at night. We're interested in it. So this is just a chance to talk about it. And it's great that people listen, and a lot of people listen in different parts of the world. So shout out to all of those people all around the world that actually tune into us.
Yep. One of our, I think it was episode 5, Mai Santa Maria, she was part of my honorable mention. She said that she's got some truck driver friends in Australia that listen to Money Never Sleeps. It's like,
oh yeah,
awesome.
We've had like on any given week, we have had random 1 or 2 listeners in like Costa Rica and all these fantastic places that you'd be like, how did anyone even hear of it?
I know.
Which is amazing.
It's a power of the podcast, right?
That's it.
That's how it works.
What's next?
I had a bunch of others.
You've loads of honorable mentions. We could probably just list off all of the other ones.
We probably could. I mean, just a couple, quickly I wanted to mention as honorable mentions. Lambert Despo, 69, that was Technologic, came up with somehow an analogy, my famous analogies between blockchain and techno music, right? I don't know how we got to that, but just through the conversation, we ended up there, and that was a heck of a lot of fun. Greg Chu, I think we nearly made him cry. and I think that was episode 20, The Crusader. And that was, we definitely got to his softer side, which, and I've, stayed close with Greg and worked with him very closely over the last couple of years since then. So yeah, and a bunch of other, like you said, just so thankful to everybody for coming on the show and being so open and being so flexible and willing to do this with us. So like you said, Owen, we couldn't do it without him. So what do you think comes next?
What comes next? Well, obviously, and this has been a great week for us because we've hit episode 100 and we've hit 100 subscribers to the newsletter, which is great.
Awesome.
And the feedback has been fantastic on that. And like I've been wanting to do something like that or write stuff more regularly, but never kind of got around to it, and came across Substack a while back. And at this point, I'm probably oversubscribed to newsletters on Substack. I can't even get through half of them. And I was like, okay, well, we floated it and we're like, okay, let's do this. And I said, I'll take on most of the writing for the moment till we get moving on it. And it seems to be working and people seem to enjoy it. And again, it seems to fit our kind of brand of, with random analogies, Pete, and that it and interesting topics, and people seem to like it, and I love doing it. And what the hardest part for me every week is trying to figure out something for that left field column. Some days I'm sitting there on a Sunday night going, shit, why did I come up with that bit?
I've got something for left field.
Oh, okay, great. Keep it for off the podcast. And send it to
I
me.
will. I'll keep it off the
away.
podcast. But I think I've said to you, I used to play left field when I played baseball.
Yeah.
Right? So
no, and we try. In fairness, we try to feed it back into the main story, and often it does, exactly. And it just shows that kind of different view most of the time. But I actually find that's the hardest bit. The other stuff is stuff that we're always heavily engrossed in, so we find it easier to write about. And it's just the interesting stuff all the time. But yeah, no, it's great. Really enjoying that. So obviously 100 subscribers, that's fantastic. In kind of 7 weeks or so that we've been doing it. Yeah, so we're trying to obviously build that number. Everyone obviously subscribe if you're listening for the first time, or if you haven't subscribed yet.
That's MoneyNeverSleeps.substack.com.
That's it. There's probably more that we look to do, I suppose, with the episodes and more video, maybe. We were very fortunate to have Gene on for the video that time. We have that capability, so kind of depends on the given week and the time in the evening that we're recording, whether I feel like being on the video or not.
Yeah, exactly. You got to get your makeup on, right?
Yeah, that's it, and the lighting and everything.
Yeah, so. No, I'm looking forward to it. Let's keep it going, keep powering through. And I think we've done so much over the last now 100 episodes. And,
absolutely.
It's been a heck of a lot of fun. And
I know when I was busy with work and I didn't actually have the time or the capacity to be on it, I missed doing it. It gave me, even though I'm recording in the evening, and I was never recording during the day, during my working day for Enterprise Ireland at all, if anyone's listening. I looked forward to getting to those interviews and talking to the people and everything. So I missed that. So I love doing it. It's great fun. Gives me a reason to chat to you every week, even though I talk to you pretty much every day anyway.
Exactly. So should we cut it there and leave this famous episode 100?
I think so.
It.
And I mean, by all means, anyone that's out there that wants to get in touch and put themselves forward, we're always open to people putting themselves or someone they know forward to be a guest. More than happy to consider that.
All right.
I think, do you know what I think we need actually is a Spotify playlist, given that they're pretty much always hip hop titles that we have for the episodes, other than maybe the Money Talks ones. Ooh. So I figured I must go back through it because I probably came up with the majority of the titles at the start. So I need to go back through it now and match the song to it, and we'll come up with a Money Never Sleeps playlist.
There we go.
Get it out there. There's a job for me.
Yeah, I got a few ideas to add to that.
I think so.
A bit of Tribe Called Quest knocking at my door with Public Enemy, as well as Poor Righteous Teacher. So
yeah. Do you remember, Pete?
We
leave it on this one. Do you remember what we thought we were going to call it at first when we were discussing
EPMD?
Yeah.
Eoin and Pete making dollars, right?
Yeah, that was it.
Making because that was EPMD, the rap group. Eric and Parrish making dollars.
Yeah. That was it.
Yeah, that would have gone over well.
I don't think so. People wouldn't have got that association. No, I think we did well with Money Never Sleeps. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Good call. Good decision there. Yeah. It's been fun tripping through the wires of that, but
yeah,
absolutely. All right, buddy.
All right.
We'll talk next week.
Yeah.
Bye. That wraps it up, folks, and thanks for listening to us to try to figure out why the world does what it does. The links for the stories that we covered are in the show notes for this episode on MoneyNeverSleeps.ie. along with each of the top 5 episodes from Eoin and from me, so check us out online. Also, you can subscribe to our Money Never Sleeps newsletter at moneyneversleeps.substack.com. If you're enjoying Money Never Sleeps and you want to see it continue, make sure you hop on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review. Remember, if you or a colleague need help attracting or retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, it is highly advisable that you build a relationship with the team at Top Tier Recruitment, as they really know their stuff. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com. Special thank you goes out this week to Paul and Laura Smith at Top Tier Recruitment for sticking with us as such supportive sponsors and great friends. Don't forget Conan Brophy from Create Sound. He mixes and edits each episode for us and is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I help startups get their products to market, get customers, and finance their vision. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or at norioventures.com, and you can follow Eoin on Twitter at Eoin Fitzgerald 9. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!